My name is Taylor Sheffield, and for most of my life, my family treated my accomplishments like background noise. A few weeks ago, I decided to test that neglect one last time. I dropped a message into our family group chat saying I had been invited to receive a national award for my work in systems architecture. I told them the ceremony would be broadcast live and that it would mean a lot if they showed up or at least tuned in. My sister, Victoria, answered first. She laughed at the text, called it a stupid award for tech nerds, and said she was going to a concert instead. A moment later, my mom, Patricia, chimed in to agree. Then my dad, Kenneth, added the line that finally settled the account. He wrote, "Don't blame us if we don't go." I read their messages twice. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I just smiled at the screen and typed a single word. All right. I put my phone face down on the table. This wasn't a heartbreak. It was an audit. That decision changed everything. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Let me know your story down in the comments. I didn't let the phone vibrate a second time. Anger wasn't loud this time. It was clinical. I rubbed my eyes, trying to summon a single shred of regret, but there was only clarity. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a balance sheet. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, staring out at the San Francisco skyline from my penthouse window. The city lights were a grid of data points, and I was finally starting to see the patterns in my own life. My family didn't see a daughter or a sister in Taylor Sheffield. They saw a reliable, high-yield revenue stream. I opened my laptop and navigated to our shared family portal, a digital leash they use to track the expenses I covered. Sitting at the top of the list was Victoria's latest demand, $4,500 for VIP tickets to the Eclipse Stadium concert. My father, Kenneth, had attached a note saying that since I was making good money in my tech thing, it was only fair that I supported my sister's budding influencer career. He called it a family contribution. Now, I realized it had been a subscription, with me footing the bill for people who had stopped providing the service of love years ago. My fingers didn't tremble as I navigated to the payment screen. This was a tactical decision. I wasn't paying for Victoria's joy. I was paying for her absence. Every dollar of that $4,500 was a brick in the wall I was building between us. If they were at the concert, they wouldn't be at my ceremony. They wouldn't be able to dim the lights on my stage with their manufactured drama or their dismissive sighs. I clicked confirm. The transaction was processed in milliseconds. This wasn't a gift. It was a ransom payment to buy back my own night. I had been the silent investor in their version of family for too long. My compassion had been a luxury resource they had overdrawn until the account hit zero. I looked at the confirmation number on the screen and felt a weight lift. I wasn't reactive. I was proactive. I was finally auditing the accounts, and the Sheffields were deep in the red. I stood up and walked through the hallway. It smelled like expensive candles and a very specific kind of silence, the kind that settles when you realize you are finally alone in a house you paid for. I looked at a framed photo on the wall, one where I was standing off to the side, almost cropped out, while Victoria blew out her birthday candles. Even then, I was the one who had bought the cake, arranged the catering, and cleaned the kitchen while they toasted to her future. I reached out and turned the frame face down. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of my office window and saw a ghost. Not the scary kind, but the useful kind. The kind that keeps the lights on and the engines running without making a sound. In the Sheffield household, my role had been carved out long ago. I was the utility. While my sister, Victoria, was groomed to be the star, my parents, Patricia and Kenneth, treated my existence like a household appliance. When Victoria got 1,000 likes on a heavily filtered photo of her morning latte, it was treated like a national holiday. My mother would spend the entire dinner speculating on her brand growth, while my father would beam with a pride he never quite managed to point in my direction. During one of those dinners, I mentioned that I had just secured a $500,000 federal innovation grant for our systems architecture project, the largest in our department's history. I waited for the spark of recognition, for a single question about the work I spent 80 hours a week perfecting. Instead, my father just nodded absent-mindedly and asked if I had remembered to process the automatic payment for their country club dues yet. My mother didn't even look up from her phone. She was too busy sharing Victoria's latest post. This is the trap of cruel normalization. In our house, my excellence wasn't an achievement to be celebrated. It was a baseline to be expected. When you are consistently reliable and relentlessly successful, your family stops seeing you as a human being with needs and starts seeing you as a reliable function. I was the electricity. I was the water. No one ever stops to thank the faucet for running. They only notice the utility when the service is interrupted. My father, Kenneth, didn't see a daughter who was pioneering safety infrastructure for the entire region. He saw a $250,000 annual salary that acted as a safety net for his own bad investments and Victoria's expensive whims. My mother, Patricia, didn't see a woman who had earned her way into the most prestigious rooms in the city. She saw a quiet, invisible engine that funded the image she was so desperate to project to her social circle. I realized that by being the one who handled everything, I had inadvertently trained them to stop looking at me altogether. I had become a high-yield asset that required zero emotional maintenance. I was the silent partner in their version of a successful life, footing the bill for a theater production where I was never allowed to take a bow. My $250,000 income was just another resource they felt entitled to overdraft. I stood up and walked to my desk, looking at the spreadsheet of their lifestyle costs. I had normalized their exploitation of me just as much as they had normalized my success. But the thing about utilities is that they can be shut off. And as I looked at the VIP tickets I had just paid for, I knew that for the Sheffields, the lights were about to go out. I sat in the silence of my office, a space I owned but rarely felt I truly inhabited. My memory pulled back to when I was 18 years old. I had just received my first acceptance letter to the School of Engineering. I remember the weight of the paper in my hand, the crisp smell of potential. I showed it to Kenneth and Patricia at the dinner table. My mother didn't even pause her conversation about Victoria's modeling portfolio. My father glanced at the letter and sighed, as if I had just handed him a bill he hadn't planned for. He told me that engineering was too industrial, that it didn't fit the family brand we were trying to build. He suggested I look into public relations or fashion marketing instead, something visible. That was the first link in the survivor's invisible chain. When you are 18 and the people who are supposed to be your foundation tell you that your dreams are an inconvenience, you don't always fight back. Sometimes you just survive. You learn that compliance is the only way to avoid the crushing weight of their disapproval. It is a psychological mechanism called learned helplessness. It's like living in a prison without bars. I stayed because I had been trained to believe that being useful was the only way I could be tolerated. For years, I played the role they assigned me. I became the silent engine because that was the safest place to be. I didn't realize that every time I handled a problem or paid a debt, I was just forging more links in that chain. I thought I was buying love, but I was really just funding my own erasure. My parents didn't see the 18-year-old girl who wanted to build bridges. They saw a resource they could use to build Victoria's stage. I looked at the clock. The awards ceremony was only hours away. The chain didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like a sunk cost. I had stayed in that prison without bars long enough to learn the layout of the cell and find the exit. I realized that my early silence wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a survival strategy that had finally reached its expiration date. I had been the ghost in their house, paying for the luxury of being ignored. The Sheffields were comfortable in the silence I provided. They didn't know that ghosts can stop haunting, and they certainly didn't know that the engine could simply walk out of the building. The hotel ballroom was a symphony of quiet power, a sea of black ties and silk where the air smelled of expensive perfume and high-stakes innovation. I sat at table 14, anchored by the steady, silent presence of my mentor, Dr. Selma Rhodes. She didn't need to say anything. She was the one person in my professional life who truly saw the gears turning behind my eyes. My phone, resting on the white linen tablecloth, began to vibrate with the rhythmic persistence of a server alert. I didn't mute it. I wanted to see the exact moment their entitlement reached its peak. Across town at Eclipse Stadium, the concert was entering its first high-energy set. In the family group chat, my father, Kenneth, posted a series of photos from the VIP suite, the suite I had paid for, with nearly $5,000 of my own money. There were images of chilled champagne, silver platters of oysters, and Victoria posing against the railing with the stadium floor glowing behind her. He captioned it with a digital sneer. Now this is what a real night looks like. Hope your little science fair isn't too boring, Taylor. Don't be too upset. We chose the party over the technicalities. Seconds later, a notification from Facebook popped up. My mother, Patricia, had posted a staged selfie of the three of them. They were beaming, the stadium lights reflecting in their eyes as if they were the ones on stage. Her caption was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive erasure, so incredibly proud of our star Victoria, celebrating her growth and her brand at Eclipse Stadium tonight. Family is everything, and showing up for the moments that truly shine is what matters most. I scrolled down to the comments. A family friend had asked if I was with them. Patricia's public reply was a clinical assassination of my character. Oh, Taylor is off doing her own little tech thing tonight. You know how she is. She's always preferred her data sets to real family. We invited her, of course, but she just doesn't have the class for an event of this scale. Some people are just built to stay in the background. I sat in a room filled with federal agency directors, pioneering engineers, and the people who actually design the infrastructure of the modern world. I didn't feel indignant. I felt like a researcher observing a predictable failure mode in a legacy system. This was the moment where their cruelty moved from private neglect to a public performance of my supposed unworthiness. They were using the very resources I provided, the money, the access, the freedom to construct a narrative where I was the villain for being invisible. They didn't realize that the stadium they were sitting in was a physical manifestation of my architecture. They were sipping $500 champagne in a building that remained standing because of the safety protocols I had spent 6 months perfecting. They were too busy mocking my little tech thing to notice that their star was shining in a constellation I had built from the ground up. I sat perfectly still as the host cleared his throat at the podium. My focus was divided. On my primary phone, the family group chat was still a stream of VIP suite arrogance. But my secondary device, the one encrypted for federal security alerts, vibrated with a different kind of urgency. It was not a technical glitch. It was a forensic audit report. My lead systems analyst had finally flagged the signature mismatch. Patricia had not just been a cold mother, she had been a calculated criminal. Over the last 18 months, she had used her access to my personal accounts to siphon exactly $500,000 from my federal innovation grant. She had moved it into a shell account labeled Victoria Sheffield Global Brands. While I was working 80-hour weeks to secure the city's safety, my own mother was stealing my legacy to pay for Victoria's fake followers and designer handbags. I felt a strange, icy calm. This was not a family dispute anymore. It was an institutional theft. I tapped a single command on my laptop, authorizing the legal team to freeze every account associated with that shell company. My compassion was no longer an overdrafted resource. The bank was closed. At that exact moment, the ballroom went dark, save for the spotlight on the stage. The host's voice boomed through the speakers. Tonight, we honor an engineer who has redefined public safety. Her software does not just manage data, it protects lives. Simultaneously, 2 miles away at Eclipse Stadium, the concert screens flickered. The high-definition displays that usually showed the pop star's face went static for 3 seconds. The music died down. A live feed from the gala cut through the performance. My face, 20 feet high and 40 feet wide, filled every screen in the arena. 50,000 people looked up. In the VIP suite, Kenneth and Patricia dropped their champagne glasses. The announcer's voice thundered through the stadium's massive sound system. Please join us in recognizing Taylor Sheffield. She is the architect of the very safety systems keeping you safe within these walls tonight. I watched my family's reaction in a small, grainy thumbnail on my screen. They were staring at me not as a daughter, not as a sister. They were looking at the woman who held the keys to their entire world. I was not the helper anymore. I was the architect of their safety, and I was about to become the architect of their total collapse. The star they were there to see was gone. The only light left was mine. They arrived at the penthouse 3 hours after my face faded from the stadium screens. I watched them through the security feed. Kenneth was red-faced, pounding his fist against the reinforced mahogany door. Patricia was frantic, her designer dress torn at the hem, clutching a phone that no longer connected to my accounts. Victoria stood behind them, her influencer persona stripped away, leaving only a confused girl who realized her allowance had just been permanently deleted. They tried their keycards. Red lights flashed, denied, denied, denied. It was a rhythmic reminder of their new status in my life. I pressed the intercom button. My voice was clinical, a line of code in an empty room. "Taylor, there has been a mistake!" Kenneth shouted, "Someone hacked the accounts. We need to get inside and fix this. We are your family." I did not let his desperation move the needle. "Kenneth," I said, "there is no mistake. There is only an audit. You were excited for the concert. I am excited for the forensic team to meet with the authorities tomorrow morning." Patricia's voice broke through, shrill and desperate. "Taylor, honey, we can explain the $500,000. It was for the family brand. You are being so cruel. Think of your sister's future." I looked at the glass plaque on my desk. "I was not being cruel. I was being precise. I am thinking of a future," I replied, "just not yours. You have overdrafted your access to my life. The subscription has ended. Goodbye, Kenneth. Goodbye, Patricia." I switched the unit to silent. Their shouting became background noise, then eventually they left. The silence that followed was the first real peace I had known in 24 years. I did not spend that night celebrating their downfall. That would be focusing on the past. Instead, I opened a new project file. I had authorized the recovery of the $500,000 plus interest. But I was not going to buy a faster car or a larger penthouse. This was the moment for the seeds of justice. There is a difference between the justice of punishment and the justice of the planter. Punishment focuses on the pain of the past. Planting focuses on the growth of the future. I established the Taylor Sheffield Foundation for Invisible Achievers. Every cent of the reclaimed $500,000 would go towards scholarships for students in industrial fields, the engineers, the architects, the silent engines who are told their dreams are not visible enough. By funding their potential, I was making sure that the next 18-year-old girl with a handful of potential would not have to forge her own chains. My victory was not defined by the red on my family's balance sheet, but by the green I was planting in the lives of others. I was no longer a utility. I was an architect of a new world. The legal fallout was swift and documented a forensic certainty that required no further input from me. Patricia and Kenneth faced the criminal reality of siphoning federal funds, while Victoria's influencer persona became a toxic asset that no investor would touch. I didn't stay to watch the bankruptcy filings or the public shame. I simply opened the family group chat one last time, scrolled past the thousands of words of entitlement, and clicked mute for 1 year. Then, I deactivated the account entirely. Distance is not cruelty. It is the primary safety protocol for survival. I spent the weekend mentoring 3 interns who reminded me of the 18-year-old girl who was once told her dreams were invisible. I told them that their value is not determined by an audience, but by the integrity of the systems they build. My victory is not the red on my family's balance sheet, but the absolute silence in my penthouse. I am no longer an invisible utility. I am the architect of my own peace. If you have ever felt like the invisible engine in your own life, you are not alone. Share this story to remind someone that their hard work is seen, even when their family looks away. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice.